staying in the tension is like irreplaceable when we're talking about their life in God.
It's what allows you to make it in life.
Yes.
Is, can I do tension with the Lord?
Right.
I have thought before that if I hit walls and I'm in tension in my life, that I'm off track.
Yes.
And that I'm not walking with the Lord. And it's actually not true.
Not true.
And I think that life becomes really discouraging. I'll just use that word again. If I think that I would be following Jesus well if I'm not hitting major walls and experiencing tension.
Right.
But if we can learn, and I think that's part of what we want in our creative rhythms, is when I'm in the pottery studio and I'm in the tension of I'm not being able to do this again, how do I learn to do connection there?
Yes.
With the Lord and with people?
I think one of the things that we have embedded deep into the discipleship process, a lot of people just see like the Instagram photos,
highlights.
Is they see in the highlights like, man, these guys do a lot of creativity. Like there's a lot of art classes happening, there's pottery, there's dance, there's leather, and I've had so many people like, I would love to do your school, but I'm not creative. And I'm like, no, you're missing the whole thing. The reason we have creativity infused within the rhythms of our school is so they can learn to become a child again.
That's right.
And
That's
they can take the posture of learning on again.
Yes.
That's right.
And we have a very small amount of time to be with them. And we found that there's nothing that disarms them like putting a canvas in front of them and putting a paintbrush in their hand and saying, paint. Because most of us, including me, like, when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was an artist. Give me a box of crayons and I was an artist. And other voices entered the story somewhere around second, third, fourth, fifth grade. And especially in 8th grade when I was told, find out what you're made to do. And I'm like, I know I'm not an artist. And another voice entered the story.
Right.
And most of us put down our creativity. And we gave up creativity for productivity, and we got to become something, do something. And so I would love to just talk for a minute, like, why is creativity within our discipleship process? Are we trying to, raise up a bunch of artists, or are we using it as a way to teach them how to become a child and take that process of learning? And also just chat some about how, again, information is not transformation. And so, like, you're going to be within creativity in our discipleship process because we're not just going to pump you full of information. We actually want you to get in the mud and get messy with God.
Man.
It's good.
I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions. It's tough because it's the thing that is the prettiest to photograph.
I know.
Right, that's true.
You've been calling it the highlight reel. It's
No, totally. It's like you can't really photograph someone breaking down in a one-on-one.
That's true.
But we can't really put that on a reel, but them painting something or doing that, like, it's so colorful. It's so dynamic. I think we talk about this. I mean, I would say it's one of the most common things that we're asked. That we are asked specifically when we travel and whatnot. And I think some of the things I often say is everyone understands how to sit and listen
and
to to take notes, to listen to profound, revelations or teaching. And they can take notes, they can say amen. And I believe that. And yes, that's true, because that's the truest, like, conditioning we've had. But when you're 25 years old or 28 or 27, and you have to return to be a learner at something you absolutely don't know how to do, and how brutally vulnerable it is to say, like, I can't do this without someone teaching me. I think we just found very early on, like, this is actually the meeting place where God enters the story, because the actual circumstance has created vulnerability. Like I think pottery would be a great example of, everyone's like,
oh man,
they're watching Emily and the teachers and they're like, oh, I got this. Especially like if they're like successful, like in life, and they're just like, I'm going to do this. And then they get in, and it's just so brutally like humbling. It's literally weeks of just trying to center clay. And It's like, oh, but let's go back to like everything you amened and said you believe to be true in session. Yeah. Let's talk about what's actually coming up when you're facing your own inadequacy. Yeah. Because that's what life is actually like. Yeah. When life is full of moments where like you're trying to center and it's collapsing. You're trying to center and it's collapsing. And like now you're actually in a moment where you're trying to center clay and it's collapsing. Yeah. And it's not even about the clay. Yeah. And I think for us, that's something we try to just communicate. Like, this isn't about the art form. Yeah. It's about you being willing to be a learner again and to become vulnerable again. That's right. Yeah. Like, this isn't about you being an artist one day. Right. This is about, can you return? Can you get outside of your parameters of how you interact with God? Yes. Like, can you engage color and form when you're talking about your process with the Lord? Yeah. And have you thought about how that might actually help you to not feel so alone? Yes. Yes. To have something that you can actually express yourself into. Yes. Right. Yes. And I think, we are a community of creatives, and we're unapologetic about that. Absolutely. We're a community of worship leaders and artists and photographers and writers. And unapologetically, our school has creative rhythms. Yes. But the misconception is that you actually have to come with some kind of skill set. Yes. Skill set. And the misconception is like that is the point, that we're an art school or, a school of creativity. I'm like, well, no, we're a school of the heart that uses creative rhythms to get your heart open before the Lord. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, and we're a school of spiritual formation. Like doing the interior work of transformation through discipleship with Jesus. Yes. And let's go back to the first moment that he was forming us. He was the sculptor with dirt under his fingernails, mud in the creases of his hands. Yes. And then the first thing he does is commissions us to be creative with him. Yeah. Come name all the animals with me. Come be fruitful and fill the earth. Yes. And he's like, partner with me. Come take my yoke and let's do this together. Yes. And and I can see the creative rhythms that we've embedded in our discipleship program. It's actually like the doctors, the construction workers, the lawyers, the ones that come to do our school, that those rhythms of creativity have been transformational for them. Absolutely. Because they haven't slowed down in years to take that posture again of a child and like be filled with wonder, be filled with mystery. And because we'll teach about, say, like, the fear of failure and the performance trap. I am what I do. We'll teach about it in class. Right. Students take the notes. They write the quotes down. They're like, I don't deal with the performance trap. Yeah. And then later you're in printmaking and you're carving into that linoleum block and you make a mistake and you just you just collapse in on yourself. Yeah. Totally collapse. The inner critic just takes over your heart. Yeah. And you realize, like, oh my goodness, like I need so much help. Yeah. And the creativity, we were saying that quote this year in the school that we use a mirror to see our face, but we use art to see our souls. Yeah. And how many times, like in all the different collectives that you're going to do at the school, our whole point is that you would begin to see who you are. You would go to the waters of reflection and see this is who I actually am. Yes. And just the way, like, I was just thinking about the collapse of Peter at the end of 3 years of discipleship. Yeah. And he's like, they're not going to crucify you. Like, I got the sword and I'm not going to deny you. Yeah. And Jesus is like, you don't even understand how needy you are. You're going to deny me 3 times. Right. And then the restoration on the beach. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Right. And like Peter is realizing his neediness. Yes. And Jesus wasn't afraid of the messy discipleship because he wanted Peter to really find out what he really believed to be true about God and what he believed to be true about himself. Right. And that's where the formation began to happen in the mess. And it's, it's in some of our students melting down at the potter's wheel, looking at a canvas and going, I'm not a painter. Like, I can't paint, and when they dare to, like, wait, who told me that? Yeah. Like, I am the Imago Dei. I am the image of God. Like I can become, I can become this, and they dare to like put something on the canvas. They dare to like get their hands in the clay. It's just incredible what happens there.
It is.
And I mean, and I know there's a lot of, there's a lot of men specifically who see our post and like, I'm never going to do that at school. This is a creative arts camp. And I'm like, no, you got to be a very brave man to come and engage what we're doing in this. We got to be a very brave woman.
Yeah, that's right.
Because we're not going to mess around. Like we are going there from the first moment and going, where are you? And where is your heart?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's just it's a rhythm that's outside of our understanding of discipleship, but it's the actual discipleship that gives them, I think, hope and courage for their life. Like, okay, I can do hard things. I'm 28 years old and I can learn something new.
Totally.
Come on.
And not be so arrogant and prideful. Like, I actually can. I mean, we had a student. I mean, it's the darkroom photography is always some of my favorite stories of like,
old school darkroom
these
photography.
archaic rhythms,
so
outdated
archaic, and where they like
photography.
They go through like they take an entire roll of film and they actually didn't put it in the camera right, and they go to process it, and there's nothing there. And just to be faced, I think for us, it's so important. It's not enough for us to just sit in a classroom and talking heads. We're just talking. And they're just listening, taking notes. That's not transformation.
Yes.
But when they have to take it and then actually apply it, like, am I worth making mistakes?
Right.
Yes.
I'm going to have to redo this entire thing. Like, am I allowed to make mistakes?
There's no edit undo. Which even for this generation is just like, for me, it's just,
sure.
One word I was just thinking about when you were talking about darkroom photography is the word agitation. Like the agitation that comes through those creative rhythms.
Yeah.
Like in the microculture of darkroom photography, or in the microculture of an art class, or in the microculture of like me at a potter's wheel. Yeah. The confidence that can come by giving into the agitation actually can inspire like what could happen in the macro, like the big scale of my life, stuff. But think about like even in the last couple of years, one of the words that our students have embraced the most from darkroom photography is agitation.
Yeah, it's true.
Because you can't even develop the image. It's not just about the exposure of light. It's all of these nuanced moments. It's the whole process. But agitation is such a key component, and I've just loved watching 20-something-year-olds go into that tiny space and embrace words like agitation and conflict, and then find confidence on the other side, and actually see what can happen. But it's so confronting because there's no edit undo in these rhythms. There's no edit undo when your clay vessel falls apart at the wheel. Right. But there's no edit undo in life.
No.
Yeah.
And I love, because just to say, the confidence that comes from giving in to the process that I resisted so much because I was so afraid of failing. Yes. And then the humility it takes to give into it, and the humility it takes for someone to come alongside of you. Yeah. I think when you talk about the culture we have year round, I'm just so proud of who our staff and our community are becoming. Like how they're giving into the agitation of life and the agitation of a craft, and how they're embracing failure unto growth, and how they're inviting more help into their need, and how that is accessing more, or it's creating more meeting places for compassion. Yes. Because even this year, I loved talking to some of the younger men who were just like not wanting to do art. They were like all in, like anything you throw at me. It could be the hardest workout. It could be anything, but not art. But even some of their experience, they had never actually like received help in that place. I remember talking to one guy. He's like, he just said, I hate it. I hate that I'm going to have to do it. Yeah. By the end, like he had experienced so much like surprising joy and love in that space, but he had to let other people into it. Yeah. And he had to let people help him. Yeah. But the resistance in those archaic collectives is like, you're going to have to let someone come and help you form your hands.
Yeah.
I don't even know how much pressure to put on the clay until someone who knows, who's had pieces fall apart, comes in kindness. And then that's that life discipleship.
Right.
Don't you think it's also just we haven't been actually discipled in seeing God in tension, right? Like when we realize like, oh, when I hit tension, that's the perfect meeting place. That's the table that he promised in Psalm 23, like in the valley, like where you're surrounded by all these voices. Like that is the meeting place of you and the Lord. And like when we don't learn how to, curiosity, like where is God?
Yeah.
Maybe the Lord is in me learning to return to like just mixing color and getting messy.
Wow.
And actually maybe God is here in my little book that is never going to be on display in an art gallery. It's for your own soul. It's for your own friendship with the Lord.
Right.
Like it's valuable to feel worthy of tension.
Right.
Yes. Come on.
It's valuable to feel worthy of learning something new and not being an expert.
Yeah. So much permission.
And I love that. Like we don't even tell them what collective they're in until like right before they get here, because you can't go on and just study it on YouTube and come in as an expert. Like the whole point is that you would yield to not knowing.
Yeah.
And that in that tension that you would learn. For us, again, it's not about the actual art form.
Right.
It's about the process of tension.
Yeah.
Can you find God in tension?
Yeah.
Yes.
Are you worthy of the tension?
Yeah.
Is your heart valuable enough to push to stay in the tension?
Right.
Like, can you do it?
Yes.
And that skill, staying in the tension, is like irreplaceable when we're talking about their life in God.
It's what allows you to make it in life.
Yes.
Is, can I do tension with the Lord?
Right.
I think I have thought before that if I hit walls and I'm in tension in my life, that I'm off track.
Yes.
And that I'm not walking with the Lord. And it's actually not true.
Not true.
And I think that life becomes really discouraging. I'll just use that word again. If I think that I would be following Jesus well if I'm not hitting major walls and experiencing tension.
Right.
But if we can learn, and I think that's part of what we want in our creative rhythms, is when I'm in the pottery studio and I'm in the tension of I'm not being able to do this again, how do I learn to do connection there with the Lord and with people?
Yeah.
And I just want to say again, I think we can read books and learn about the fear of failure and learn about not being defined by what we do.
Yeah.
But it's not until we actually experience.
That's right.
I'm in a room where if I fail, people don't reject me.
Yes.
People aren't abandoning me. People stay connected to me.
Right.
I can be vulnerable.
Right.
I could actually cry about this and not be, totally exposed or ashamed.
Right.
And people will stay here in connection with me, and I also can learn how to connect with the Lord there.
Yes.
And that, you take that into any part of your life, and you can learn how to thrive there. Because the fear of failure may come up in darkroom photography, but then even more importantly, it may come up when you have kids.
Yeah.
It will come up.
Right.
When you get
Oh, yeah.
married. It will come up in these major parts of life when you are in a career.
Right.
And what do you do there?
Right.
And so part of our discipleship is like when you're hitting that tension, how do you do that with Jesus?
Right.
Yeah.
And you can thrive if you learn that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you think the rest that Jesus was saying is available in his yoke was the rest to find God in the ordinary? And when we can discover God in the ordinary, in the what you were saying, the 98% of life, not just the moment when I'm on the stage leading worship or I'm at the height of my gifting, but when we can know God in the ordinary, like Brother Lawrence washing the dishes.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, I would wash dishes the rest of my life because God's here.
Yeah.
This is the life that he's promised, and to know God in the tension. I mean, it's Jesus is like Father's in the sparrows, he's in the lilies.
Right.
He's, Jesus is seeing his Father in everything,
Yeah.
from the yeast to the wheat to all the everything. Like the most minuscule things, Jesus is saying the magnificence of God is in these. Yes. And if we can, like, for my own heart, if I can learn to find God in all the ordinary, that's where the rest comes. That's where the peace comes, that we're all aching for, that we're all longing for. Mm-hmm. And then God's like this Father that wants our fruitfulness, so he's pruning. Yeah. And he's engineering agitation because he longs for us to become everything he dreamed for us to be. Mm-hmm. I think one of the ways that describes that tension for me is that Brennan Manning quote that God loves me as I am, but he loves me so much he won't let me stay where I am.
Yeah, that's good.
Come on.
And that back to that moment with the student, like realizing like, okay, I don't have to pose anymore. But also there's this Father that's like, let's go from glory to glory. Mm-hmm. You're made to become so much more. And I love you right as you are right now. Like I love you in your mess, but also I have dreams for you to become so much more.
Right. And that's the willingness to disbelieve that we don't arrive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And I think, I was just thinking back to, I mean, this was like so many years ago, probably our second or third school. And our friend who was teaching art then he's like, you should come to art class today. And
said to you.
To me.
Yeah, you're the leader of the school.
I think this will be a great story to tell because it's like and you know, we started the 18-inch journey. We lead the 18-inch journey. We do the 18-inch journey every year. I've done the 18-inch journey 15 times. But from a student perspective, this would probably be the strongest student moment I've ever had. And he was like, oh, you should come to art, you know, and the immediate like, oh my God, do I want to do that? You know, and then it kicked in like, you should do this. Like it would be so good for the students to see you like do art with them. And I was probably in my late 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. But, you know, it's like, it's one thing to say like, oh, do the creative rhythms. They're so good for you. But then when you actually have to step back into them, and I'm like, I really should just go, you know, do dinner. At that time, I did all the cooking and everything. And I'm like, maybe I should just go fix dinner. And he's like, no, you should come. You should come. So I go to the art class, and that day they were like, they had, you know, they actually at that time had a canvas, and they were taping off. They pick your color palette and then tape off. We're going to do lines. And I was like, okay, I can do this. Like on my color palette. I love it. You know, I'm going to tape it off perfectly, you know, do my lines, my colored lines. I'm like, this is easy. Like, great. Pull the tape off. I'm loving it. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, I love this. And he's like, wonderful. And everyone gets done. And then he hands out like the Sharpie marker, you know, the big ones. I'm like, not the little ones, like the ones
tip.
that like you have to hold like this.
The jumbo ones.
The jumbo ones. And he's like, okay, and now I just want everyone to just scribble all over what you've just painted. And I'm like, what? Like, and then I'm like, I'm gonna go fix dinner. Like, I'm good. I'm out. And he's like, you're not leaving. And I'm like, and then the panic. I mean, just panic hits my heart. And I'm like, I'm not gonna do this part. I really should, you know. Yeah. Then it's the excuses. I really should go. I should go fix dinner. And he's like, Melissa, you are not leaving right now. And he like puts the Sharpie in my hand. He's like, you can do this.
Come on.
Scribble. And I'm like, what is happening on the inside of me? And I'm leading at the time. So I'm really ultra freaking out. Man. I'm like, all the students are watching me completely melt down. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I want to do it. Like, I like it the way it is. It's perfectly perfect. I don't want to do it. He's like, you can do it. Scribble. And I'm like, what's happening?
Yeah.
What, like, we're talking about a canvas that I could have literally just thrown away afterwards. What's the big deal? Like, just scribble with the Sharpie. But the confrontation, like, can I make mistakes? Can I, like, but what if I do it wrong and I'm out of control? I mean, all of those things were coming up so strong. And he's like, Melissa, just scribble. And I'm like, I felt paralyzed. I'm like, I can't. I can't. And then I started sobbing in front of the student. And he put his hand over my eyes like this. And he took my other hand and put it on the canvas. And he just said, scribble. And I'm like, just like scribbling and just sobbing.
Man.
And the fear of failure like broke off my life that day. Wow. Like it just started like that thing, that like performance and do it perfect and do it right. And everyone's watching. It just like started cracking, like, right? It never, that can't even be compared to like someone saying like, I'm going to pray for you for the fear of failure to be lifted off your life. Yeah. You can't even compare the two to like coming face to face with something so ridiculous that you're like, why am I so triggered?
Agitation.
It's art. Who cares? But it's like, we all care. Yeah. We care so much. Yeah. We don't want anyone to see the process. Yeah. We want it to just be done and be perfect and be beautiful and compartmentalized and like
control.
And in control.
Right.
And
yes.
I look back, would you have done that by yourself as well?
Never.
Like just the community need in a moment like that.
No, never. Yeah. I mean, and like that leader was one of our dear friends. It's probably one of the places where he saw my weakness more than any other place.
Yeah.
And the gift of that was like what happened in that moment was someone fought for me.
That's right.
Over something that in the scheme of life is kind of meaningless. But for my soul and my heart, it was everything. Like, yes, you learning pottery in the scheme of your career is meaningless. Right. You learning how to dig into linoleum and be okay with digging too deep in the scheme of your career as a pastor or a youth leader or, you know, in the corporate world or a doctor or accountant is somewhat meaningless. But you learning that God will stay with you when you break down and you fall apart. Now that you can't pay for.
His presence will rush in.
His presence will rush in. People will stay.
Yes.
People aren't going to run away when you get really messy. I mean, and that part of our school is one of the most sacred rhythms we have. And it is really hard to put into words because of how holy it is. Like it's never been about them becoming artists or potters or leather workers or darkroom photographers or even musicians. Or it's like that's never been the point. If it inspires unto that, wonderful. But the point has always been like, do you believe that Jesus stays in tension? And actually you getting messy and learning and like believing with your heart that God is going to stay when you don't know why you're melting down. And it's a Sharpie and a canvas about 8 by 10. It was about that big. It wasn't even huge.
Oh my God.
You know, it's like when you are like, oh, the Lord stays with me when I get really crazy out of control.
Yes.
And people stay with me.
Yes.
Then we're like, okay, it's game on. Like we can do life.
Yes.
And that is, I think, one of our deepest desires.
That's right.
We want you to, we don't want you to just like survive. We want you to thrive in your life. And if you don't believe that God stays in tension, like you're never going to find a thriving rhythm. When you lose your job or your car breaks down or your friend, you know, cuts you off or like all these things that are just normal life tension.
Tragic, difficult,
tragic
hard things.
That's right. That's right.
Do. And how do we stay with the Lord?
How do we stay?
How do we not lose heart?
Right.
Right. And how do we cultivate a belief system that the Lord is willing? That's why he sent the Holy Spirit. That's why he came, like, so that we wouldn't be alone.
Yes.
It's
deep. Yeah.
And I know it scares so many people, but it's a rhythm that we can't not have because it brings us to the end of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that, like, we unapologetically say that is the point. And if you don't want to come and come to the table and learn, like be a learner, like life is going to be really hard.
Yeah.
Like you have to yield to learning. And the best thing is to yield to something that you actually can't do without someone helping you.